Hello and good evening. So we're going to go through a couple of charts this evening because I want to put in context this uh, Sabbath as it relates to several different things that pertain to the end times and specifically how knowable things are. If you guys watched the video that I did a couple nights ago, last night, something like that, it's about the threefold interpretation of Psalm 90:10. That we can know everything. And this is going to put in more perspective, specifically the overview of world history. I have said it before, I will say it again. If you have an unclear view of origins, you will have an unclear view of end times. The two are very, very interrelated. You will not come away with a clear picture of the timeline of the end times if you do not have a clear timeline of the origin of the world. There was no bones made about this at all in scripture about how many years of world history there are. We're not talking about pre-Adamic because in the scope of Bible prophecy, there were 5 days that came before Adam, 5 literal 24-hour days. And that is all there is to it. God's creative week was 6 24-hour days, and in the seventh day, God rested from his labors. That was written into the law in Exodus 20, that the people were supposed to work 6 days and remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, seventh day. That was extended to the land in Leviticus 25. That is where the Jubilee timeline comes in, is with the establishment of the weeks of years, not weeks of days, but weeks of years as they relate to Leviticus 25. When ye shall come into the land that I shall give you, then the land shall declare a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, prune thy vineyard, gather in the grapes thereof, and the 7th year shall be a year of rest. Thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years shall be unto thee 49 years, and in the 50th year hallow and proclaim Jubilee. That pattern for counting Sabbath cycles and Jubilee specifically is uninterrupted from the establishment after. And so from the beginning, Nisan 10 of say 1406, then Nisan 10 of 2025, 70 later. We're going to make this abundantly clear why 70. If you don't agree with the interpretation that I gave, or maybe you didn't hear it, threefold interpretation of Psalm 90:10, there is inference in the book of Daniel that it's all about 70s. He was in the 70 years of Babylonian captivity, receiving the vision of the 70 weeks, the 70th week of which will begin on the 70th Jubilee. Ezekiel and Daniel are very interrelated in that. But the 70s is inference in Daniel 9. We're going to make that much clearer as we go through this evening, because in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. There is a type and shadow that we'll go through to prove out the 70 as an accurate number. So from beginning to ending, there you go. What we're going to go through tonight is the overview of world history. One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to us, who are not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. The one thing that I want to make clear, and I will continue to make clear throughout this video, is there are not 6,000 years precisely of world history. And it does not say that there are. It says one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years. When inserting the word as in comparison, it's called a simile. You have 2 types of comparisons, a simile or a metaphor. Comparing things that are similar, not the same. So what we are looking for is a similar pattern. World history will not be exactly 6 years. It will be as 6,000 years. Similar to, but not the same. Yes, the usage of words is very important. I will highlight them when I believe that it is necessary to do so to prove the point, that it is similar to, but not the same as. One of the mistakes that people make when they're trying to calculate the timeline of world history is that they begin at creation to try to figure out when the Jubilees start at creation to try to figure out the end times. That is inaccurate because Jubilees did not begin until in the 50th year after Israel entered into the Promised Land, came out of Egypt, out of the wilderness and into the Promised Land. That is when they began to be counted. Can you take them back to creation from that point? Yes, and we'll do that. But you do not start at creation. You start where they were commanded to be started. When ye shall come into the land that I shall give you, then the land shall declare a Sabbath unto the Lord. So let's take this back and we'll go to, go to a different chart. Let's go to this one here. Jubilees and periods of 7 from the inception. If you're looking at 70 Jubilees here, and then obviously a 7-year 70th week would be the plus 7 after that. But from 1406 to 2025, this is how it all works out. What you will see here is something that we're going to go through, so I will establish this. This is the period of 7 that included the birth of Christ. Jesus was born in 6 BC. We'll go through that. 6 was, if you count this period of 7 as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 is the 4th period of 7 in that week. The 4th day of creation, sun, moon, and stars. And 2 Peter 1:19 calls Jesus the day star. 6 BC is also the first year of that period of 7. Day 1 of creation, God separated the light from the dark. The day he called night. Jesus is called the light of the world and the day star. Is that proof that he was born in 6 BC? Nope, it's just really interesting. Anyway, this is the periods of 7. And in the 50th year, hallow and proclaim Jubilee. So this is how it all works out. And of course, yes, there's 70. 2025 is the 70th Jubilee from 1406, and then plus 7 years. That would be kingdom. When the kingdom comes 7 years later, 2032 BC. So just interesting to note. Also interesting to note that the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince began in this was the period of 7 that it began in. This is the period of 7 it ended in. 445 BC, March 14th, 445 BC is the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king in the month Nisan. That was the going forth the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. Plus 69 periods of 7 later takes you to April 6, 32 AD. In their respective periods of 7, they are the 3rd year. Begins in 447, 445 would be the 3rd year in that period of 7. Unto the Messiah the Prince is the 3rd year in that period of 7. That would be respective to the 3rd day of the week where Jesus was prophesied to, after the 3rd day he was prophesied to rise. This is the 3rd day of that week of years where it falls. Just another interesting correlation. Not that that is the specific, not that that is why he rose in 32 AD, but it's the 3rd day parallel. And you also, with the year of his birth in its respective week of years, and that it is the 1st year in a week of years, you have correlations to day 1 and day 4 of creation. Light and day and stars. He is the light of the world. He is the day star, and we are children of we are not of the night nor of day. We are children of the light and of the day, just like he is. We are not of the night nor of darkness. And then obviously 32 AD with the death, burial, resurrection of Christ, he rose on the 3rd day, specifically the 3rd day of that week of years. How does this get us closer to understanding how many years of world history they are? Well, like I said, you can take that backward to creation, which is what I have done here. And in type and shadow, the book of Exodus from the giving of the law all the way through the conclusion of the book of Joshua is a perfect overlay of world history. Right here is where they begin to be counted. 1406 BC, when Israel came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. That was where weeks of years began to be counted that led to the establishment of the Jubilee. In the 50th year, you shall hallow it and proclaim Jubilee throughout all your land. 70 from there is 2025, as we discussed. When you assume approximately 6,000 years of world history, all you've got to do is go back to 4,000 creation around 4,000, using the same method to count backward as you did to count forward. So from here, minus 49, minus 49, minus 49, because it's in the 50th year, you come to creation. It would be Tishri 1, 4003 BC would be your day of creation. So because I'm curious, I look at this and I think, well, except for these here, these three here, and except for this last one, you've got 3 periods of 40. Where in the Bible, and this was when I was going through the book of Exodus, I don't even know how I got on this, I just did. Oh, it was when I was writing Jubilee in Ezekiel's temple, understanding the entry date and the 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan. After that, the land rested from war and lots were partial to the tribe and the kingdom. That is a precise type and shadow of the end times vision in the book of Ezekiel, where there's a benchmark event which begins a count, 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan, after which the land rests from war and the lots are partial to the tribes in the kingdom. That's Ezekiel 40 through 48. So I was looking at types and shadows and understanding periods of 40. I went all the way back to the giving of the law in Exodus, and I'm sure I was going through the book of Exodus when I originally had this thought well way back. This is not a recent thought. This is not a recent finding for me. I just don't share often because I'm more about the direct links in scripture, the direct wording, and less about types and shadows, but they are there and they're fascinating. So what we do here is we take this back to creation and we say, okay, there's not exactly 6,000 years, but as one would expect, there wouldn't be, because it says is as. It doesn't say one day is 1,000 years, it says is as, which means it's approximate, similar to, not the same. So what we're looking for here is the Jubilee year, which brings us closest to 6,000 years of world history. When we actually look this up and plot this out, from the giving of the law in Exodus 20 to the kingdom, there is a precise, or to the parceling of lots to the tribes in the kingdom, from Exodus 20 through Joshua 13. There is a precise overlay of the entirety of world history in type and shadow. Let's begin, and I have some explanations down here. Yes, this chart is available on academia, as they all are. It's called the Final Jubilee and an Overview of World History. So creation. Now, we're going to take the years out of this and look at the color coding. So we have a benchmark event. This is the giving of the law on Sinai, Exodus 19. This was what Israel was commanded to do, come to the base of the mount, and the Lord would meet them. After the dispensation of what it shows in Exodus 20 as the 10 Commandments, Moses was given a command to go up the mount. Exodus 24:18. This was after the people confirmed the words of the book. Let's read Exodus 24, verse 1. He said unto Moses, come up unto the Lord, thou, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, 70 of the elders of Israel, worship ye afar off. Moses alone shall come near the Lord, they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, all the judgments. All the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord hath said we will do. Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, rose up early in the morning, builded an altar under the hill, 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. They made sacrifices. Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins. Half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient. This was the confirmation of the old covenant between the people and God. Fast forward to verse 18. Moses went into the midst of the cloud and gat him up in the mount. Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. So this is your benchmark event. This is the giving of the law. Then Moses is up the mount 40 days. Okay? So what are these other 2 days? 2 days down the mount to deal with the people. When Moses came down the mount in Exodus 32, they were dancing around a golden calf naked because they thought Moses had fled from them and that God had forsaken them. So Moses comes down the mount, and what happens? He and Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, and he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. This is Exodus 32:17. Verse 18, he said, it is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither it is the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. Now, there were some outcomes here. The first of which was the commandment was given by Moses to the Levites to start slaying people. He came unto Israel, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side and go in and out from camp to gate throughout the camp. Go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay every man his brother and every man his companion and every man his neighbor. The children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. That was the problem children being dealt with. And then what did Moses do? For Moses had said, consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, every man upon his son, every man upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day. It came to pass on the morrow that Moses said to the people, so this is the day after they came down from the mount, so this is your first yellow day. Moses said, it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said unto the people, ye have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord, peradventure I shall make an atonement for your sin. Moses returned unto the Lord, O this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now if ye wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of the book which thou hast written. The Lord said unto Moses, whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Now therefore now go, lead the people unto a place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, my angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them. And then the Lord plagued the people because of the golden calf. Fast forward to Exodus 34 in verse 28. So this is going to be after the other day down the mount. We're back up the mount for 40 days. Exodus 34 verse 28. He was there 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water. He wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Verse 29, it came to pass when Moses came down from the Mount Sinai with 2 tables of testimony in Moses' hand when he came down from the mount, that Moses wist not that the skin of his face shone when he talked with him. When Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come nigh him. Moses called unto them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned unto him, and Moses talked with him. Afterward all the children of Israel came nigh, he gave them in commandment all the Lord had spoken with him in Sinai. Until Moses had done speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. This is why this is highlighted black here, because when we actually plug the numbers of world history back in, the years of world history back in, we're going to make some correlations here. That's the end of the second period of 40 days up and back down the mount. When Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. He came out and spake unto the children of Israel that which he was commanded. The children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, and Moses put the veil upon his face again until he went in to speak with him. Now the rest of the book, Exodus 35 and after, is the willful offering to give jewelry, gold, garments, ink, dyes, construction materials to build the tabernacle in the wilderness. The tabernacle was erected in the wilderness. The last chapter of the book tells us that the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, which is Nisan 1, thou shalt set up the tabernacle of the congregation. And so that was done in the second year. The first month of the second year, they reared up the tabernacle in the wilderness. How long were they in the wilderness? Wandering. 40 years is that third period of 40. Until Joshua 4:19. They came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. They entered the promised land. There's a 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan, after which the land rests from war and the lots are parceled to the tribes in the promised land. I have another chart where that is expressed on there. And that other chart, let's go to. This is the one I refer to most. It's called Biblical Events Overlaying World History. And this is where we're going to get into the timeline of Christ, which pertains much more specifically to the 6,000 years of world history. This is the chart up here that I have, which is the same one that I just showed you, but it's got the extra 7 years. The conquest for the land and the lots are parceled to the tribes in the promised land at the end of that. So what you have here is from creation to kingdom, a precise overlay of the events from the giving of the law on Sinai to the parceling of the lots in the kingdom. You have a benchmark event, which is the giving of the law. Moses is 40 days up the mount, 2 days down the mount to deal with the people. Then he's back up the mount, 40 days to receive the law. At the end of that 40 days, his face shone like the sun. That was a foreshadow of the transfiguration of Christ, which when you plug the actual years into world history, was the period of time that Christ had his ministry, was transfigured, and also rose in glory. Then you have this third period of 40, which was the construction of the tabernacle in the wilderness and their wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before they entered their promised land. Then they conquested for the land, and then the lots were parceled to the tribe after the land rested from war. So when you, like I said, plug the numbers of actual world history back in here, you have the precise period of time that Christ, in history, that Christ was glorified, rose in glory, which is what Moses' face shining like the sun previewed. In fact, Moses was present in the transfiguration, was he not? Now I need to go look, because I might have just lied to you. Matthew 17. After 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, bringeth them up into an high mountain apart. He was transfigured before them. His face did shine as the sun, and his raiment white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto him Moses and Elias, talking with him. Yeah, that was the precise time frame in history. That Jubilee period from 16 AD to 65 AD, where Moses appeared in the transfiguration with Christ. Moses himself being transfigured from having been in the presence of God at the end of his second period of 40 days up the mount. This being the precise point in time where Jesus had his ministry, died for the sins under the old covenant, shut it up, instituted the new covenant with that same death and shed blood on the cross, was buried and rose again on the third day and descended. Christ being the chief cornerstone, upon which we are lively stones built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. This 40 years in actual world history, this 40 period of Jubilee years, is from Christ to kingdom. Specifically from Christ to the rapture of the church, the final Jubilee year, upon which the 70th week will start the measuring for that temple. There is a 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan, after which the land rests from war when Jesus comes back, puts an end to it, sets up his kingdom, and the lots are parceled to the tribes in the kingdom. This benchmark event, 2025 and plus 7, is Ezekiel 40 through 42. It's the measuring for Ezekiel's temple. This begins, Ezekiel 43 begins with the anointing of the Most Holy, which is the 6th and final purpose for the 70 weeks. And Ezekiel 48 ends with the lots being parceled to the tribes in the kingdom. So what you have here in the type and shadow that is the Sabbath, God's creative week, 6 days he worked, and the 7th year he rested, written into the law for the people, written into the law for the land. The land Sabbath is 70 jubilees from beginning to ending, the ending being the beginning of the 70th week, plus that 7-year conquest for the land. And when you take this Sabbath into the entirety of world history, you have 123, which is overlaid precisely by the pattern from Exodus 20 through Joshua 13. This last period of 40 is the building of the spiritual temple, where the removal of the spiritual temple will occur directly before the measuring for the physical temple, is a dispensational aspect. Now, what I do here is I show the transition from BC to AD, because if you are simply counting from 1406 BC up to AD years, you will come to 2024. That is because it will include a countdown to 0 and a count up to 80 years. If you are using a Gregorian calendar, you have to adjust for the fact that there is no year 0. So this, if you do not make that adjustment, would be 15 AD, and all of these years would be -1, and this would be 2024. When you are adjusting for no year 0 on our calendar, if you are using our calendar to count as I am, you have to subtract the 0 and add in 1 extra year. So that is something I always show, is the transition from BC to AD. Because if you're just counting down, you're counting a year that doesn't exist. So you're going to arrive at an inaccurate conclusion. When we look at the life of Christ, so why, I guess I will explain this. When you arrive at this conclusion, it's not 6,000 years of world history. Oh, it's actually, I have it written down here. It's 6,034 years of world history, which is 123 Jubilees plus the 7-year 70th week. That is 6,034. What are the extra 34 years for? Let's talk about it. It's the mystery of God through Christ. What will be revealed at the midpoint of the 70th week? In the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. It's the life of Christ from birth to ascension revealed worldwide, visually, Revelation 12, and verbally by the angel in Revelation 14, 6, and 7, which is, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. The gospel of the kingdom is the life of Christ from conception to ascension, and obviously that he's coming back. The first time that Israel was instructed to prepare for their king, the first offering of the kingdom, had a count associated with it. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again in the wall, even in troublous times. March 14th, 445 BC, in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, unto the Messiah the Prince, 69 periods of 7 later on a 360-day calendar. Takes you from 445 BC to April 6, 32 AD. Triumphal entry. Bring that over here. Triumphal entry, Nisan 10, 32 AD minus 3.5 years, takes you to Tishri 10, the Day of Atonement, the day that Jesus assumed the role of the scapegoat and proclaimed Jubilee. In the 10th day of the 7th month, you shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. Leviticus 25:9, that was forward looking to the proclamation of Jubilee by the voice of the trump, whose is Jesus, after he became the scapegoat and had the sins of the world laid upon his head, which he would have done on Tishri 10 and 28 AD. That is verifiable because John the Baptist, who is 6 months older, began his ministry in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius, which is in 28 AD. According to Luke 3, we are told these things. So from Tishri 10, 28 AD to Nisan 10, 32 AD, Jesus had a ministry. That ministry ended unto the Messiah the Prince. That was the king coming to bring the kingdom. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee, lowly and meek, riding the colt, the foal of a donkey. Daniel refers to him as a prince because the contrast of Messiah the Prince is the prince who shall come. Revelation 6 is rider on the white horse, the one who comes in the place of. Not that it is not referring to the same event from Nisan 10, just that Daniel has different terminology for his princes, i.e. principalities. So, What we are looking for here also is the age of Christ respective to the beginning of his ministry. Remember from the previous chart that we went through, Jesus was born in 6 BC. He would have had to have been because Herod died in Nisan of 4 BC. Jesus would have been at least close to 2 years of age because that was the command that Herod gave, was to have male children 2 and under killed. Jesus was born on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, a solemn assembly, circumcised on the 8th day, which is what the 8th day assembly foreshadowed or forward looked to, was the circumcision of Christ, wherefore he took on him the seed of Abraham. Hebrews 2 tells us this, verily he took not on himself the nature of angels, he took on him the seed of Abraham, that he might destroy the power of, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. So taking on himself the seed of Abraham was actually what the circumcision of Christ served to do on the 8th day, as commanded in the law, and as commanded of the seed of Abraham in Genesis 17. The legal command is Leviticus 12. So Feast of Tabernacles, day 1, birth, 8th day assembly, circumcision of Christ. He began his ministry on the Day of Atonement, where he became the scapegoat, had the sins of Israel laid upon his head, and proclaimed a jubilee per Leviticus 25:9. In the 10th day of the 7th month, he shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And then his ministry was sounding the trumpet, which is the Feast of Trumpets. It was forward-looking to the incarnation of the Creator God. God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. Feast of Trumpets was the incarnation of the Creator God, by whom he also, God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, and by whom also he made the worlds. The incarnation of the Creator, who began to speak with the voice of the trumpet creation into existence on Tishri 1, Feast of Trumpets, 4003 BC. So Jesus, if and since Herod died in Nisan of 4 BC, and Jesus had to be somewhere around 2 years of age, but because he was born in the month Tishri and not the month Nisan, we can put his birth in Tishri of 6 BC. He would have been 18 months old at that time. The important part here is understanding that Jesus fulfilled a prophecy after he was born, after they were told to flee to Egypt because of Herod having all male children slain under 2 years of age. And then after Herod died, an angel came to Joseph and said it was safe to go back, but they took the long way around and they settled in Nazareth. Matthew 2:23 says, when they settled in Nazareth, that was the point at which Jesus began to be called the Nazarene. He came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Nazarene in the Hebrew is Nazaret. That is the word that is used for the branch. Jesus is called the branch. It was as the branch that he was prophesied to grow up out of his place, Nazareth, and to build the temple of the Lord. He shall bear the glory, he shall sit and rule upon his throne and be priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. The prophecy of Jesus being after the order of Melchizedek, uniting the office of king and priest in one, was done as the branch, as the Nazarene, and thus from this point, he began to be called the Nazarene, and it was as the branch that he began his ministry, and as the branch that he became the high priest of the new covenant. It is from the time that they came and settled in Nazarene that this about 30 years of age begins to count. Not that he was 30 years old, that he was 30 years from the point of assuming the title of the branch in order to minister as intercessor in a priestly capacity and to ultimately become the high priest of the new covenant. From 3 BC, when they settled back in Nazareth, thereabouts, until 28 AD, there were 30 years. What you can gather from this is that from this point where Jesus became the branch, became the Nazarene, there are 34 years. From creation, Tishri 1 of 4003 BC, to the time when Jesus settled back in Nazareth is 4,000 years. Plus the intervention of God in the affairs of mankind, Jesus becomes the branch and has a 34-year life from that point. There is your intervention in the 6,000 years of world history, which is why it is as a day is as 1,000 years. Why there are not 6,000 years precisely? Because Jesus, the mystery of God revealed through the life of Christ, is your additional 34 years from Matthew 2:23, when Jesus became the Nazarene, until the time that he died for the sins of the world. And then 3 days later he rose, and then 40 days later he ascended. From the time that Jesus presented the kingdom to Israel the first time, which is unto the Messiah, the Prince, there will be 2,000 additional years. You have 4,000 years from creation to the branch. 34 years from the branch to the first presentation of the kingdom, Jesus going to the cross, laying his life down in payment for sins, and giving everyone a path to him. And then 2,000 years. That is where 6,034 years comes from. People who say the Jews believe there are 6,000 years, yeah, well, the Jews don't recognize Jesus either. It is only in understanding how the Sabbath plays into the overview of world history. Exodus and Joshua help, but this timeline of Christ gives you your additional 34 years. Anyone who is saying there are 6,000 years exactly are failing to account for the life of Christ intervening in the affairs of mankind to save the world. There are not 6,000 years of world history. There are 6,034. And in 2025, Jesus is coming back for those who are his. And 7 years later, he's going to come back and offer the earthly kingdom to the people who should have accepted it the first time and didn't, because they will be ready that time. Joel 2 says that is when the fig tree will bear her fruit. The fig tree and the vine will yield their strength. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. There are not 6,000, there are 6,034 years of world history. And from Exodus 20 through Joshua 13, there is a precise overlay of the entirety of world history in types and shadows.